But really, what I want to kind of summarize this whole podcast episode about is you cannot neglect your feelings. You can't neglect acknowledging your feelings. You have to say, yeah, this is real and I'm okay. It's okay for me to feel this way. It doesn't mean I'm any less of a person or that I'm not capable or that I'm weak or whatever it is. Let's just hash this out now and get to the bottom of this. And maybe I just need to change my mindset around how I'm framing this in my mind so I can look at it differently. So I can look at it in a way that doesn't make me feel bad about it. And let's just also be realistic with ourselves. Why are we putting so much pressure on ourselves? Like, why? It's just so unnecessary. I'm Jenny Finnell, CRNA and founder of CRNA School Prep Academy. I have always had a passion for helping those who aspire to become a CRNA. A couple of years ago, I started mentoring a handful of prospective students. Fast forward to today, and I have a successful mentoring program that has impacted hundreds of aspiring and now current nurse anesthesia students. What I enjoy the most in my business is connecting with you, the future CRNA. I love learning and growing with you. The road to CRNA is full of unique challenges, and no two journeys are the same. But every journey has a learning opportunity. I'm here to share what I have learned over the years from not just my students, but CRNA community leaders, program faculty, and from my time as a practicing CRNA. This will be your one-stop shop to get the mentoring you need to not only guide you into this career path, but support you all the way through to graduation day. So if you're a nursing student who's exploring the possibility, an ICU nurse actively pursuing CRNA, or a current nurse anesthesia student, you're in the right place. Tune in for inspiration and actionable takeaways that will help you from start to finish. Let's get started. What did I struggle with the most in CRNA school? You may think it's chemistry or maybe physics, but you may be surprised. So let's go ahead and get into today's episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of CRNA School Prep Academy podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Finnell, and CRNA. And today I'm going to share with you guys what I struggle with the most during CRNA school. Now, many of you are probably embarking on your CRNA journey, and you're probably terrified of the academic rigor and the clinical challenge, right, of walking into the unknown. And while don't get me wrong, both of those things can be very stressful and very new and unfamiliar, but by far what I struggle with the most in CRNA school was actually my mindset and my mental wellness. And I'd love to say I was alone in this because I don't wish this upon anyone. But unfortunately, I don't think that's true. I think a lot of people entering CRNA school probably underestimate or estimate where they're at from a mental standpoint when they enter their program. And so I kind of want to share some of my background, and it's equally a very big passion point of mine now, and something that I've really had to pull from on multiple occasions in my own personal life. And I now get to share that with our CRNA School Prep Academy students. So let's get into more of the nitty gritty as far as ways I struggled in CRNA school. One of the big ones I think was time management. And the reason why I'm bringing up time management and not going right into the mental or mindset is because really poor time management can really affect your mental well-being. And that may or may not surprise you, but the reason why I think that affected my own mental wellness is because essentially I wasn't efficient with my time, and it led me into the breaking point of stress more often, right? So I equally think the longer you're out of school, meaning the longer you're out of a full-time school position, the harder it actually becomes to kind of get back into full-time school mode again. I was out for 3 years prior to going back to CRNA school. And while I'm not unencouraging those of you who've been out of school for 20 plus years, it is completely manageable. But I will say it's just different. And it's something that it's funny. It's almost like the way I can kind of frame it is when my parents watch our grandkids, right? Obviously they've raised 2 children. We're both adults, me and my sister. But there's been times we've gone on like family vacation, and I've asked my parents to watch our like 18-month-old, right, who is dangerous climbing stairs and who can probably take a knife and stab their eye out. And, I say, okay, watch them, thinking they really have to watch them, right? Like, you can't take your eye off of them. And so I leave the room for a minute to get a shower, come back. I'm like, where are they? Oh, I don't know where they're at. And here they are climbing up and down the stairs. And it's like, oh my gosh. But then you think, well, what the heck? You should know better. You've been parents, like, but they've been out of it for a long enough period of time where they kind of forgot that they really can't take their eye off of a child that age. And so it kind of gives it some perspective as far as when you're out of full-time school role and you go back to a full-time education role, it's just different as far as how you spend your time. And it's crazy how quickly you forget what your priorities need to be. So I remember thinking this. I remember thinking when I started CRNA school, this was my full-time job, right? That I quit my full-time job as a medical ICU nurse to go back to school full-time. This was my full-time job. But the reality is, and I hate to break this to you, but it's more than a full-time job because it doesn't really stop after an 8-hour day, right? I mean, you're in it 24/7, 7 days a week. You're in CRNA school for 3 years. And so it's not that you're working every single waking hour of your life, but it's always on your mind, right? It's not like, another way to kind of put this perspective is when I worked shift as a medical ICU nurse. When I was off my shift, I was off my shift, meaning I clock out, bye, peace out. I didn't think about work until I had to be back the next day, right? So I got to like check out mentally from being at work. Where when you're in CRNA school, yeah, your class is over and you get to go home, but you kind of take some of that home with you, if that makes sense, where you're like, oh, I got this project, or I got to do this tomorrow. And it's kind of, you end up having to create an agenda. You have to prioritize, where when you're just working full time, you don't have to prioritize. I mean, you might have to play with your schedule a little bit to get the vacation you want off or the time you want off for whatever you're doing that's enjoyable. But when you're in CRNA school, you're literally trying to manage every single waking moment so you can be efficient with your study skills, right? So you can get the tasks that you have to get done so you can pass the course. And so it becomes a little bit more challenging and different than what you're used to. So I struggled with that. That led me down a path of, and don't get me wrong, I'm not someone who's a procrastinator. In fact, that causes more anxiety for me. So I tend to be someone who always gets things done ahead of time. Like I can't stand procrastination. I'm hardwired to just care too much. Sometimes I wish I couldn't care. And thank goodness I have my type B husband because I'm too type A. Like I need him to chill me out a little bit sometimes. You gotta have a balance, right? So, but that being said, because I'm type A, and I think a lot of you are also type A. I mean, if there's type B, more power to you. I think you make great CRNAs because you're really chill, really laid back. I love that. You're like a breath of fresh air. But that being said, I think the vast majority of you are probably also type A, which I think equally makes you hardwired to have a performance pressure. And this is where I really want to get into this podcast more deeply. This performance pressure. I definitely succumbed to this, and it really led me down to a really ugly path. And it affected me both mentally and physically. And so I like to shed light on this topic. I think it's something that's not spoken out enough about. I do think a lot of students struggle with anxiety, depression during CRNA school, and they don't talk about it. For whatever reason, I mean, myself included. I know I shared this with my husband. I know he knew I suffered panic attacks. But that being said, I actually don't know how much of my close school friends actually knew I was suffering from. I think they knew I think they knew I had sleeping issues because we would joke about my issues taking Ambien because I was that crazy person who would like wake up and like eat a whole bag of candy and go back to bed, like when I took Ambien. But that being said, so I joke about that, but it wasn't really a joke. So I guess some of my classmates probably knew I was having issues, but we really didn't get into the dark side of it. It was more like lighthearted. Oh yeah, I'm crazy on Ambien because I can't sleep at night, so I'm trying. So we would share, but it wasn't like I really got into it, right? I didn't really open up about my feelings around how I was feeling because I felt really vulnerable and kind of honestly scared to share that side of what I was dealing with. So again, I want to kind of enter this topic with kind of compassion and heart that if you are suffering, I'm sorry that you're here, but I'm here to try to help you. And I want you to know that it's okay and you're going to be okay. But the sooner you can kind of recognize these signs that you're struggling and address it, like full on front, full face address it, the better off you're going to be and the more able you're going to be able to get through it. CRNA school will challenge you in a lot of ways that you've never been challenged, and which is a good thing, right? Challenge can be a good thing. It really helps you grow both as a person, academically, professionally, skill-wise. It really helps you pull through that with that grit. It helps you build grit. So really, CRNA school is a lot of growth, and you don't realize when it's happening because it feels so slow and like kind of painful at times. But when you reflect back on it years to come, you're going to look back and say, that was probably the most growth I've experienced in that short period of time. One of the most growthful points in my own personal life still to this day. And I have had several points in my life up until this point that I think I've experienced a lot of Personal growth. First, that really challenged me was entering college, right? Being on my own, figuring it out, and figuring out how to study, because I didn't do good my freshman year in college, and I remember feeling like, wow, this is a test, right? This is a test. I got to figure this out. That was like the first personal growth experience I experienced that was like really challenged me to get a good mental mindset. Next was grad school. I should say the stress of working in the medical ICU was the second one, where I battled depression, working in the medical ICU, dealing with death and suffering all around me. It just wasn't for me. I really struggled with that. So that was probably number 2. Then number 3 was grad school, right? Number 4 was having children. Number 5 was actually starting CRNA School Prep Academy, believe it or not, is becoming an entrepreneur, which I had no intention of doing, but I actually really love it, and I think it was a blessing in disguise. It really has brought me to face some more mental challenges and helped me work on that, right? So I really see a challenge in your life as a period of massive personal growth, and this is going to be one of them. And that's something to be incredibly proud of and incredibly excited about. But obviously when you're in the thralls of it, you're like, oh my gosh, this is painful. And that's just the way it is. Personal growth can hurt, and you shouldn't shy away from it though, because you will grow so much and reap the rewards down the road. But let's kind of get into what happened to me and kind of some things that like I feel like I could have done differently that would have changed my experience and helped me. So the first of that is, I feel like I essentially faced, probably about a year into school was probably when I hit my max burnout point, right? Probably about a year in. Now, speaking of which, I only went to school for 28 months. Or was it 27? It was right around there. Whatever. What does a month matter? It doesn't matter. But you're going to be in school for 36 months, right? So I really still think it's going to hit for you at that year mark where you're going to be like, boom, I hit a brick wall. Because in the beginning, I feel like you can get that excitement that this is new, it's exciting, and I did this, I'm becoming a CRNA, this is so exciting. You can ride on that for quite some time. But then right around that year mark, when, especially if you have a just not the best mindset, and you're really letting your performance pressure get to you, you can really succumb to burnout, and it leads to lack of motivation and desire, right? And so one of the things I've shared before that I've really leaned on is I framed my acceptance letter and I put it on my desk. And when I would have these really bad days or days where I just felt like, how am I going to keep doing this? How can I keep going? I would look at that and I'd say, I earned this. I deserve to be here, and I'm going to show up for myself because I want to be here. I want to become a CRNA. I'm not going to quit, and I'm going to keep going. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to keep going. So that really helped. But essentially, I let it affect me so much so that I really started having physical side effects. I developed anxiety. I'd already suffered from anxiety prior to starting CRNA school, but I started having panic attacks again. I had insomnia issues. I had stomach ulcers where I was on taking like Prilosec around the clock and Tums because Prilosec wasn't enough. So those are the physical issues I suffered from during CRNA school. Now, if I look back and reflect back on that experience, and I can tell you right now that I have experienced an immense amount of stress. I don't suffer from panic attacks. I don't have insomnia. And while I can't say I have everything figured out, I sure as heck don't, you guys. I mean, I am literally still trying to figure out my own life, what I'm doing. And I still struggle. But I equally know what I've done differently is I've addressed inwardly, which I did not do in grad school. I addressed outwardly, and I will explain what I mean by that. So when you look for outward things to make you who you are, you will always be left feeling to fall short. Why? Because you're always trying to do more. You never feel satisfied with what you've done because you're this like constant desire to keep getting more and more confirmation outwardly that you are enough, outwardly that you've done good. And it's like this desire that never ends. It's like this candle that just has, it won't blow out. It's like that trick candle, and you're like, it won't blow out. I can't get it. And that's kind of what you create for yourself when you're looking outwardly for recognition and a sense of accomplishment, right? I didn't look inside. I didn't feel proud of who I was on the inside. I didn't look at that. I ignored her and I shut her up. I said, be quiet. You're going to be tough. You're going to tough it out. You're going to do this. Just stop complaining. Complainers or whiners are weak. And like, this is toxic mindset, you guys. And I didn't recognize this until like way later in my life. Probably after we had kids even. Like, I don't think I even started thinking like this until after we had kids. And then really starting the business, like I said, was a lifesaver because it really made me address these thoughts and these feelings that were going through my mind. Imposter syndrome is one of them too. And I definitely, I suffer from imposter syndrome. I have. I don't every day now, but I still equally have to like silence that voice because it definitely came up for me. And so I had to really address it. But back in CRNA school, I didn't really address it. I kind of just tried to quiet it down and tried to just say, like, just keep going, just keep going. But what happened is over time that kind of festered within me and it really left me feeling empty. And so that was a problem. And so what I'm trying to share with you today is, gosh dang it, acknowledge your feelings. It's okay. Like, just because, like, first and foremost, let me say, you are more than capable of being here and showing up and becoming a CRNA. 100%. You are. But you're equally, don't feel like you're any less capable if you have to ask for help, if you have to actually say, I'm not okay. Like, if you have to say I'm not okay, it doesn't mean you're weaker of a person, that you're not capable. It just means that you're a human and you're dealing with an immense amount of pressure and stress, and you need to address that and why you are making that outwardly make you feel like you're any less. And so one of those things where, like, the performance pressure, it's weird because I thought it was coming on to me. I thought others were doing it to me, but you actually have to recognize that you're doing it to yourself. It's like this, I kind of call it coming out of my body experience, where I actually zoom out and I look down. It kind of sounds weird saying that, but I do routinely practice that now, like, especially when I'm in a situation where I'm feeling really icky about myself, for whatever reason that may be. I actually like try to come out of my body. I try to look at the situation like I'm floating above my body, which you probably don't think I'm crazy, but this is just a technique I use, and it allows me to kind of put things in perspective. And what it does is it allows me to kind of see two sides and allows me to kind of assess the negative Jenny and then the positive Jenny. And I always try to go to a place of gratitude, even in times of chaos, even in times of like, man, this just stinks. And, sometimes the coin just doesn't toss in your favor, right? And you're like, why? Well, sometimes the why is not going to be a why that is going to be fair. I mean, let's just face it. Life is not ever going to be fair. And sometimes you just have to deal with that. And I think when you make that feel bad about, when that negative result makes you feel bad for who you are, you won't be able to get through that in a way that makes you stronger. It'll actually build fear and resentment and anger and anxiety and depression, right? So you have to really address why you're internalizing this in a way that's negatively reflecting upon who you are as a person. And you have to learn how to separate that out. And it's never going to go away, because I think in human nature, you have to rewire your brain, and that just takes time. It's like when you start your gym routine, like you go for like 3 weeks straight and you're like, oh, I'm so sore, but I still don't see a six pack yet. Like, this is so frustrating. I still have, chicken wings on my arms. Like, what's going on? And it's because it's just with the mental mindset. It's like exercise to your brain. You have to really make a point to practice a good mental mindset and mental wellness every day. It's a lifestyle. It's really, truly a lifestyle. But I promise you, if you do this, holy cow, your life's going to change, and for the better. People around you will notice, right? They'll be impacted too. But really what I want to kind of summarize this whole podcast episode about is you cannot neglect your feelings. You can't neglect acknowledging your feelings. You have to say, yeah, this is real and I'm okay. It's okay for me to feel this way. It doesn't mean I'm any less of a person, or that I'm not capable, or that I'm weak, or whatever it is. Let's just hash this out now and get to the bottom of this. And maybe I just need to change my mindset around how I'm framing this in my mind, so I can look at it differently. So I can look at it in a way that doesn't make me feel bad about it. And let's just also be realistic with ourselves. Why are we putting so much pressure on ourselves? Like, why? It's just so unnecessary. And let me also reiterate that you're always thinking others are judging you. Like, I think it's human nature to think everyone's staring at you, right? Like, oh, they're noticing what I'm doing. Like, oh my gosh. Like, by the way, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, have you guys noticed that I got purple hair? Yeah. So have you noticed that, right? I could have been self-conscious about that. Like, oh no, they're going to see Jenny has purple hair now. She's going crazy. Or I could just say, well, if they notice it, cool. And I'm okay. I'm excited to have purple hair in the back of my hair. And so it's one of those things where I didn't, like, if you assume that other people are noticing you, you're actually probably assuming wrong. And I bet you not very many of you actually noticed that until I pointed it out. And it just goes to show that as humans, we're actually usually more inwardly focused. And so we think others may be judging us for something that we are subconsciously insecure about, right? And so we automatically think it stands like a sore thumb, because we are insecure about it. So we think others will easily notice it. But the reality is that's just not true. Most people are doing the same thing, right? They're thinking about their own insecurities and how they are then worried about what other people are going to see about them. So no one's thinking about you. They're actually thinking about themselves. Now, it kind of sounds kind of icky, but at the same token, I'm not saying like your mom or dad don't think about you or your significant other doesn't think about you. But I'm just trying to put it in a big picture perspective that most people are not walking around day to day thinking about, Sally or Joey from clinical. They're not. They're thinking about themselves. They're thinking about what I have to do today, what I have going on in my life. They're not thinking about so-and-so didn't do his A-line the right way or caused an arterial vasospasm because they tried 5 times. Like we don't care. Like, it's not important. It's like, so if you're making yourself feel bad because you didn't get an A-line because you think you let down your preceptor, remind yourself that you are doing that to yourself. Like, your preceptor does not care. They're not putting that pressure on you. You're putting that pressure on you. So I hope that kind of clarified. Maybe that was, I don't know if that made sense in my explanation, but that's kind of the clearest explanation I can come up with. And the sooner I started reframing my mindset to think that way, to recognize when I'm doing that to myself, to not be shameful of things I want to do, to not assume that other people are going to judge me for having purple hair, and just being proud and excited for who I am and how I want to express myself, and or how, like, maybe I'm going to make mistakes, and that's okay. It's okay if I didn't get an A-line. I'm just going to get better at it over time. And so I think it's just reframing it to not feel like it's any reflection on you. And it kind of goes into, again, focusing inwardly on who you are and being proud of that and being okay with that. And acknowledging also your feelings. So I feel like you probably didn't expect this lecture to be, all woo-woo about, feelings and things like that. But I really, truly think it's an important topic. And that is what I struggle with the most in CRNA school, was my own mental wellness and the performance pressure and the burnout and the insomnia and panic attacks. If I had to pick anything that I look back and think, that made it really hard. Like that the mental wellness aspect of my CRNA journey is what made my journey incredibly hard. Yes, the academics were challenging. The clinical things were new and scary and different, and yes, challenging. But had I had the better mindset around all of that, I don't think I would have felt as anxious or as scared as I felt if I wasn't making it about me all the time. If I just was like, no one's thinking about me. I'm thinking about me. That's essentially what it comes down to. And, I also think the whole mentality of you have to be tough, you can't complain. And I hate to say this, but I feel like I grew up with that culture, and I don't think I'm alone in that. I think a lot of us have grown up with don't whine, don't complain. And I am a parent now, and I feel like I'm doing it to my own children. Even I don't even notice I'm doing it. It's like one of those inherent things where when someone whines or complains, you say, stop whining, right? I'm like, ooh. Like, I don't really like, and don't get me wrong, we have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old and an 18-month-old. So sometimes that whining is really inappropriate. But I equally think, like, as an adult, if you are struggling, if you have a whine or complain, just freaking get it out. Even if it's to yourself, like, speak about it and hash it out, even if it's just to yourself in the bathroom, right? Speak about why you're feeling this way and get to the bottom of that. Because if you don't, it will fester. I think the added stress in CRNA school is what really allows those things to really fester. So now I know you're probably wondering, well, Jenny, this is all really insightful and everything, but what did you really struggle with outside of that in CRNA school? Because I know there's some of you listening that are like, I really just want to know, is there a really hard subject or a really hard topic that you struggle with? So I don't want to disappoint. So I'm going to go ahead and share that with you now. So if I had to pick any of, I should give you guys kind of a few things that I remember struggling with in CRNA school, concept-wise and academic-wise, and clinical-wise, this would be my list. So now, mind you, I was someone who struggled with chemistry in undergrad, so that still was one of my weaknesses in grad school. Was I thought chemistry was hard. And now in CRNA school, chemistry is a very narrow window of chemistry, meaning you don't have to know everything. It's just a very narrow window, but I still found that challenging. But actually more so than chemistry, which I was surprised about because I love pharmacology, is I found like things like dose efficacy curves to be challenging. I found just trying to memorize different blood gas coefficients and understanding, all of that to be challenging. But I also equally found it fun and challenging in a fun way, right? So I guess if I had to point out anything, in physics, I forgot about physics. Now, I had never had physics in my undergrad, or even, I don't know if I even had it in high school, if I'm being honest. The physics that we had to learn, like law Laplace and all the blood gas laws, that was so new to me that I was like, whoa, like that blew my mind. I mean, And I'm someone who hates airplanes. I know airplanes work with the law of physics, but I still hate flying on an airplane that weighs a gazillion million tons and it can just fly in the air. But it's physics, right? And so I had never really grasped physics prior to grad school. And I also found this fun. I think physics is really interesting. I really do. But I equally find it incredibly hard and challenging. So I guess if I had to point out, like, I love pathophysiology. Like, that was always my jam. Don't get me wrong. It's not easy either, but I like it because it's like a puzzle and all the systems kind of work together. And really so is physics and so is chemistry. But I think it was the fact that physics was really brand new for me that made it really challenging. Chemistry was just never my jam as far as, it wasn't really something I enjoy as much, and just made it harder for me to understand it in a way that was enjoyable and effective of learning, right? And then pharmacy, I love pharmacology, but I equally think there's some things in pharmacology that are just way over my head that I'm like, I would not care if I didn't know that, right? Like, so I think if I had to think about anything in school, if I had to label it from, scale of 1 to 10, I would say physics for me was probably like a 7. Chemistry is probably like an 8 or 9 as far as difficulty. And then the certain aspects of pharmacology was more like a 6-ish kind of thing. So chemistry is my hardest thing, then physics, and then some aspects of pharm. Pathophysiology for me, don't get me wrong, it was challenging. I definitely couldn't remember. I couldn't understand everything, but it never felt like it was one of my topics that I hated, right? It was never one of my things like, oh, I dread this. Like, where I did dread chemistry. And physics sometimes was like, oh, it's just so hard because I've never learned it before, which is why our NAR boot camp teaches chemistry and physics. This is one of the reasons why we made sure we taught that lecture to you guys inside our nurse anesthesia resident boot camp, because we understand that many of you need a refresher or an opening on really specific topics that you will then cover again in CRNA school. Other than that, the academics for me, it really was, I really actually thought it was fun. And I know you're probably like, wow, but I really did. And I actually think you're going to feel the same way. I think academics is fun because it's what you've wanted to learn for so long. And again, if you like pathophysiology, pharmacology, and the disease process and fluid management, and it's fun. So yes, it's a lot, but it's really enjoyable to learn. And then the clinical aspect, what was the hardest? I really liked clinical too, but this is totally not even clinical related, but actually what I thought was the hardest thing. And for me, it was actually working with different CRNAs and attendings. That for me was what the hardest thing was in clinical, and then just not knowing what you don't know, which is always hard, right? I even till this day, I'm like, I just wish I knew that, but you don't know what you don't know until you realize you don't know it. And, so it's like that in clinical where you're walking into kind of you're walking in blind and you're like, well, I think I know, but you really don't know until you experience it. And I feel like a lot of your career as a CRNA is kind of that. I mean, you're going to always have these moments, epiphany moments, you're like, oh, aha, this now makes sense. Now I get to experience this, and now I see that I was confused about the topic before, but now I have clarity because I actually saw it play out in real life. But working with different CRNAs and different attendings, oh, man, don't get me wrong, the vast majority, 85 to 90%, 80, let's just say 85% of who I got to work with in CRNA school, as far as CRNAs, attendings, they were fabulous. They were just amazing. You could tell they cared. They took me under their wing. And it was a good experience. Now, the other 15% was kind of rocky. But that 15%, it's like one of those things where when you have a good experience, you're less likely to tell someone, but when you have a bad experience, you're like, oh my gosh, you should know about this. This is what happened, right? So it's more impactful mentally when you have a bad experience versus a good experience, which is unfortunate. I don't know why your brain's hardwired that way. It should be the opposite way around. But I just know that it was not as common as the good experience was. But when I did have a bad experience, it really, it was back to the mindset that I said was my biggest struggle, and that I would take it personally. It would make me feel bad about who I was, and that I wasn't good enough, and that I wasn't going to make it as a CRNA. I actually had a preceptor tell me, this is hurtful, right? They told me that I didn't have a backbone to be a CRNA. They told me that. During my time with them in the OR, they said, you're too nice to be a CRNA. You will never survive this career path. You don't have a backbone. Ouch. I don't even know where it came from. I wasn't even, I just, to me, it was completely out of left field. Now, this same person who said that to me was also someone who went on to do other things that made me upset and actually made me cry one day. So that being said, it was just that one person. But that one person had so many negative interactions with them that I was just like, man, is this really me? Maybe I am too nice. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I don't have a big enough backbone. Maybe I can't stand up for my patient or myself. And it really made me question that, which is so wrong. And I'll be damned. I can be feisty. I'm hot-blooded Irish. But I am nice. I am nice too, and I'm very respectful. I was raised to be respectful. Like I'm respectful, but do me wrong and I'll stand up for myself. But not even that, but just if I have to advocate for my patient and I know it's what they need, I don't care who I'm talking to. I don't care if they're the Pope. I'll advocate for the patient and I'll disagree. And so I know I have it in me, but I think it made me question that when I had someone just tell me I was too nice. And that being said, in my 8 years of being a CRNA, my niceness has actually served me incredibly well. And again, I lead with respect. Whenever I go someplace, I have a smile. I say hi to everyone. I'm pleasant. I try to pitch in to be a team player, check on my coworkers. I try to treat other people the way I would want to be treated. Is that so bad? Like, is that so wrong? And so it's served me incredibly well in my career to be nice. I can save my feisty attitude for at home, right? Ask my husband. So it's one of those things where I guess I want to just leave you with this. If you have a bad day with a preceptor, or you have a preceptor who's just saying some things that make you feel bad about yourself, really analyze where that's coming from and make it a physical choice to not believe it, right? Make it a physical choice to say, I'm just not going to agree with you. I'm going to agree to disagree. And that's okay. I also had a preceptor one time, like literally right as I was getting ready to graduate. And this was, I realized after the fact was coming from her own insecurities, putting it on me. But I physically remember her telling me that I will hate my career for the first 6 months. You guys, this is my last week as a student getting ready to graduate, and I had my preceptor tell me I was going to hate my life for 6 months after I graduate. Why would you say that? Like, I went home in tears. I left clinical that day. I literally had like 2 days left of clinical and I was going to graduate. I went home in tears, and I remember telling my husband, like, I hope I didn't make a mistake becoming a CRNA. I'm scared now. I don't know if I don't want to hate my career path. I'm scared I'm going to be so miserable after I graduate. I've been miserable for 2 years now. I can't take anymore. I mean, I was at my breaking point where I was empty, like I spoke to. I didn't have a good mental mindset and I felt really empty. So to someone to say that to me when I was already like hollow, it felt like a giant blow to the stomach where I just felt like the wind was knocked out of me. Like I was like, ugh. Like everything I had left in me felt like it was just gone. And it was incredibly like just disheartening. And, I just remember it wasn't probably until like 24 to 48 hours later after I finished my last clinical day, which was a 24-hour shift, by the way, which was incredibly brutal, but whatever, I did it. And I remember thinking that was their insecurities on themselves and what their experience was like. And just because they experienced that does not mean I'm going to experience that. And guess what? I did not experience that at all. I loved my career. Very quickly out of the gate, I got onto an open heart team. I loved it. Was it challenging and hard? Yeah, it was, but I loved every minute of it. I would say the first 2 to 3 weeks of being a CRNA, I was scared. 2 to 3 weeks, I was scared. And don't get me wrong, I think it's one of those things where, not scared in a way that like I can't function, but scared because I was like, ooh, I just want to make a good impression, right? It was more of like, I want to make sure they know they can trust me and build that trust. But I came to find after a period of time that there's really one key way to build trust: respect and communication. That's it. It's not super hard. You don't have to know everything. Trust and communication. Remember that. Trust and communication. Communication means asking questions. Trust and respect means being polite, asking courteously, being open-ended. I didn't mean trust. I meant respect. Respect builds trust, okay? So respect and communication build trust. That's how you build trust. It's not by knowing everything. And so I think once I accepted that reality, it led the fear to like kind of dwindle into the background, which I still have. I think to be a CRNA, you're always going to have that fear in the back that's like, I hope I can handle this, right? I hope I'm ready for what I'm walking into, but let's go. But I also equally know I'm reassured by the fact that I have a team. I have support. I have communication. And if I'm respectful, they're going to give me that courtesy back to educate me, to empower me, to teach me. And it's always been that way. I've had some of the best learning experiences as a CRNA, not as a student, as a CRNA. And it's different when you learn as a CRNA versus a student. It's actually more rewarding, I think, because you finally let go of that performance pressure to a certain extent. So I guess if you're getting ready to graduate and you're afraid, let me leave you with the fact that you're going to love your life. You're going to love being a CRNA. You're going to rock it. It's going to feel so freeing, so gratifying to get where you are. And, if you have someone make you feel otherwise, that's where you need to check it, because don't let anyone else rain on your parade. All right. So I'll leave you guys with that. I hope you enjoyed this episode. As always, thank you so very much for tuning in to CRNA School Prep Academy. I appreciate you. So until next week, cheers to your future. Hey, future CRNA, as always, I appreciate you and your loyalty. Thank you so very much for tuning in this week. I'd love to hear from you, so screenshot this episode and share it to your IG stories with your biggest takeaway. Don't forget to tag me at CRNA School Prep Academy so I can personally thank you. Be sure to head over to CRNASchoolPrepAcademy.com to check out our blog and gather free resources to help you along your CRNA journey. Stay strong, and I'll see you next week.